taking a look at a quick deck tech, and just a word of warning, this video is a little bit different. This video is a replay video as opposed to a live play video, which means I'm going back and reviewing the matches individually, taking a look at sideboarding in between games, etc., as far as what I did, why I did it, etc. So it's a little bit different format. The video is probably going to be a little bit more condensed. You're not going to have as much time in the matches, so you might only see, this whole match, or all 5 matches will be on one video most likely. This was a league that I did during some of my downtime. I was on vacation and spent some time at my parents' house. So I played some games and then decided to go and record them a little bit. As far as the deck list, same one we've been operating with. Not really going to go over the main deck too much, other than that I do generally like the 20 land lists over the 19 land lists. I generally lose a lot of games to 1 land keeps. As far as the split on Helix and Skullcrack, Skullcrack might be on the ascending a little bit. Searing Blaze in this particular league that you're going to see is very highly effective. However, there's been a lot of leagues where I've been pouring this out quite a bit, so another card to keep an eye on. Lightning Helix, obviously pretty good, mostly in the racing situations that we find ourselves in sometimes. And then beyond that, Sanctifier and Vec, a card that is very powerful in non-burn red-based decks. Obviously, it's pretty reasonable in the burn mirror, but it doesn't provide the same oomph as something like Core Firewalker, but it does give you more counterplay against things like Dredge, Reanimator, Ragavan, Darcy decks, etc. Path Exile gives you outs to things like Death Shadow and Tarmogoyf, Smash Smithereens, and Wear Terror because things like Chalice and Hammer Time are decks. Whirling Vortex, kind of a split card. It's pretty reasonable against control decks, also being one of our few potential trump cards against things like Rhinos, while that's been on the decline. If you take too many Whirling Vortexes out of the sideboard without replacing them with something like Skullcracks or Exquisite Firecrafts, we don't generally have enough cards to bring in against Blue-White X Control or the 4-color control piles, so that's why it's kind of there. Deflecting Palm has had time to shine, but the last couple of video sets have not necessarily been it, though it's still a card I like against things like Murktide, Death Shadow, etc. So, that said, as a friendly reminder, if you do like red-based content, especially of the Burn and Murktide varieties, please consider subscribing to the channel, as we aim to be the most informative channel for those on YouTube. Alright, let's get into the matches. Alright, we're here for match number 1. Game number 1. You're unfortunately on the die roll this game. To reveal our companion, we're against a Yorion deck. Looking at this opening hand, against most Yorion decks, we should be in pretty decent shape. There's a wide variety of Yorion decks, the 4-color pile being the most notable, but some people play Yorion in various other piles. Opponent leads on Basic Forest. Looks like we might be up against 4-color control. Attack with Swizzle Spear here. Opponent kept a 1-lander, so we might get a bit of a cheesy win here. Having to do the thing. Lava Spike them, they have to do the thing again. We go ahead and fire off Lightning Helix as holding up Skullcrack if we can't draw any spells. Might be a good thing in the face of Omnath if we go into the mid-game. Put Lurrus into our hand here. Alternative line was hold up Skullcrack and Protocap Sunbake Canyon, but I think getting Lurrus in our hand here was kind of important, as the window for us to win this game is kind of closing. And then we go ahead and do the thing here. Go ahead and put Lurrus into, or play Boros Charm, put Lurrus into play. Opponent has to have another answer. They have Prismatic Ending. So we go ahead and cast that, go ahead and crack that, play that, put them to 3. Our opponent's limited on what things they can have other than, say, Counterspell here, and apparently they don't even have Counterspell. So, I know these are a bit rapid fire, but really not really a whole lot went on with this game other than our opponent getting mana screwed for a couple turns, and then we were able to close out the game without them drawing enough counterspells to kind of mitigate their 2-for-1, 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 2-for-1 deck. So that's it. Look at sideboarding and move on to game number 2. All right, for game number 2, boarded out all but one copy of Searing Blaze and boarded in our copies of Roiling Vortex. So while not the best game plan, Searing Blaze does have some targets against their deck. So our opponent is on the play again. We reveal Lurrus, obviously. Looking at this opening hand, it's a very good opening hand. 2 lands, a bunch of 1-drops. We play a Goblin Guide. He does have the Bolt. They go Renin 6 here, which Renin 6 is pretty bad against Burn, quite honestly. Going to attack them, put them to 16. A shock, play Eternal Witness, get back Bolt. So they've done quite a bit of damage to themselves. We play that. We bolt their guy. Do this. Suspend a Rift Bolt, even if they have Teferi here, you know. It's kind of awkward for them, but they just have another Eternal Witness. We just Eternal Witness their face, swing, they're forced to chump block, go to 2, and then with the anti-Lycan thing in hand, they're pretty much nothing they can do, and they concede. So, while 4-color Yorion is a very powerful deck, it does have some awkwardness with the mana. They have some very powerful spells, but the main one against us that we're worried about is them getting to Omnath with a fetch land that allows them to gain 4 life on one turn, gain 4 life on another turn, and those are very difficult draws to beat. But otherwise, their mana base can deal them a lot of damage, and if they stumble at all, as we saw in this match, we can get under them and kill them quickly. Although they do have a bunch of 2-for-1s available, they also have the ability to, pitch cast their elementals, which can be annoying, particularly Solitude, not Solemnity. Solemnity is part of a different combo deck, but yeah, quick nice win against 4-color control. Well, let's move on to the next match. All right, moving on to match number 2. On the die roll again. Seems fine. It's not like super exciting, no 1-drop creatures or anything, but against an opponent with no whatchamacallit, it's kind of hard to tell what's going on. We get hit by Basking Rootwalla with Burning Inquiry. All we can do here is cast Lava Spike. Opponent plays Goblin more, gets swinging for a bunch. It's our Vengevine deck, so, it does Neonate, pitches Vengevine, gets to smack us for a ton here. And then basically we have to play on the defense here. Swinging with everything, we block and Boros Charm, put them to 8. Obviously a land would let us win here. Unfortunately, we didn't draw a land for the double Boros Charm. Though, I guess to be fair, also Inspiring Vantage wouldn't have done very well, as that would have come into play tapped. So it would have been a very specific subset of decks. And I guess, Fetch Land would do it, because we could still fetch a basic mountain, if there was one basic mountain left in our deck. But, Blue-Red Madness, with Vengevines obviously getting us here. Yeah, see you for sideboarding, and game number 2. Alright, game number 2, boarded out some Eidolons. Could argue keeping them in. I brought in the copies of Path to Exile, and Sanctifier and Deck. Is there anything else we boarded in? Path to Exile, Sanctifier and Deck, and Smash the Smithereens, because they were, I don't recall if we saw it that game, but they were most likely a Hollow One deck as well. So can't remember if we saw them in game number 1 or not. I think they discarded 1 or something. So this hand seems pretty terrible. I don't know why I kept it, honestly. They have Cookbook, which isn't dynamic we didn't see in game number 1. Which means a burnout plan is much more difficult. They have Asmo. The Cookbook. At least they don't have the Daredevil to pair with it. If they do even run it in their deck, we bolt their face, pass turn, trying to hold up Skullcrack. Opponent pitches a Burning Inquiry, gets a hollow one down. Asmo gets in. We path their dude. Once again, holding up Skullcrack. So while we do get to prevent this late game, they just get to untap and gain a bunch of life. Which they do, put us to 12. We put Luris in their hand because there's nothing we can do to prevent them. They do the thing. We get lucky to draw a Skullcrack there. They play another hollow one. This is where things probably need to slow down a little bit. Lightning Helix put us to Skullcrack them to 3. Untap. And smash the Smithereens them for the win. Opponent did lose this game themselves by tapping low how they did. I think if they just hold up their food tokens, I don't know if there's any way we can actually win the game, even with Skullcrack. So, I think their opponent punted a little bit in this particular game and gave us an opportunity to win, and we didn't see the Asthma package game 1, so it gave us a chance to reevaluate how we sideboard, and let's see if we made any changes for sideboarding for game number 3. Alright, doesn't look like we made any changes for sideboarding for game number 3. Still not sure how I feel about Boros Charms and stuff, but they could obviously be on Blood Moon, so mitigating white cards that aren't necessarily high impact. It seems like borderline against what their deck does. I think it's fine with double Searing Blaze, but obviously it could be a little bit awkward. They lead on Fireblade Adept. We draw 1-drop. We were supposed to Lava Spike here, but do the thing. They have Insolent Neonate. You get Vengevine, get an Asmo down, so they're kind of going bonkers this game. I think I should have taken the opportunity here to chump block. I think, honestly, that was a mistake. Opponent has that. Attacks with a thing. We get to do that. They get a free shot to... whatchamacallit. Okay, they get to gain some life here. We kill Asmo, swing in, get a 10. They get to go a little bit nuts, get a Vengevine back, and then their deck is very super swingy. Goblin Guide here, Searing Blaze something, but sitting at 1, we're just dead because we can't cast any other spells. So, and they had 2 menace creatures, so, and they just get to get us here. So, a little bit of an off-the-wall deck compared to obviously like 4-color Yorion, which is kind of a staple in the format at this point. But you see how swingy this deck can be. This is kind of the spiritual successor to the Mono Red Hollow 1 decks that used to have like Faithless Looting and stuff. And obviously, with Otherworld Cookbook, maybe they found their secondary enabler, question mark. We didn't see Daredevil out of them, but they had a lot of other things going on with Vengevine and Madness creatures and such, so definitely an interesting deck, and definitely got us good here in this particular match. Alright, back for match number 3 in this re-recording. We're finally on the play for a match. This hand looks pretty good. Goblin God, Swift Spear. Keep on Goblin God. We see Overrun to him. Okay. There goes Birds of Paradise. So most likely at this point we're up against Yawg. At this point, get on the board as much as we can. Try to pressure them. They play Grist. At this point, our only real play is to... we have a couple different plays. We could play Eidolon, suspend Riftbolt. But here I just wanted to continue to pressure the opponent as much as possible. Kind of ignoring Grist because, yeah, they do have infinite trump blockers here. Scavenging is obviously kind of scary. Play the thing, attack with everything here. And it's kind of incentivized to block. They go ahead to activate to Blood Artist. We Skullcrack them. And kind of get the overwhelming burn win that honestly we haven't seen terribly a lot of on the channel. And there hasn't been a lot of the multiple 1-drop starts that kind of gives burn those unbeatable draw feels sometimes, although those draws have been beaten a lot more recently than I remember previously. But that said, let's get into sideboarding and see how we combat Yawg. Alright, sideboarding. So, boarding against decks like Yawg is kind of tricky because they are a creature deck at their core, and I do like to board out Eidolon a lot of times in creature-based matchups, although they're not necessarily as aggressive as a lot of creature-based decks. They're more... They can chip shot you, but they generally win you by either overwhelming card advantage through Yawg, or they, combo you out and kill you. As far as that matchup, there's a lot of things we can bring in out of the sideboard. I was kind of experimenting because this isn't a matchup that I've actually run into a lot, because Yawg's only recently started to gain some popularity because of Demonic Tutors and him being at the top of the Trophy Race leaderboard along with Aspiring Spike. So this particular game, I boarded out Boros Charms and Eidolons and brought in Roiling Vortex, Sanctifier and Vec, and Path to Exile, I think. So we boarded out 8 cards, brought in 3, 6, 8 cards. The thought behind Sanctifier is it shuts down the Drolls Messenger graveyard end of things, but I don't necessarily think that was the correct line to take. Alright, so this hand, 1 lander, a little bit of a risk we end up keeping because we're on the draw. Maybe it's not the best. Let's go ahead and bolt the bird. They have an Ignoble Hierarch, we bolt that as well. As a Yawgmoth, we play Goblin Guide, no attack. They have Essence Warden. We go ahead and bolt. They block. We kill Essence Warden in response. So, opponent starts to draw out of it. We unfortunately have no way to really push through. And at this point, I just kind of give up because we have no terribly easy way to deal with what our opponent's got going on. And their Scavenging Ooze has infinite fuel. Now, this might have been a premature concession. Obviously we still have a lot of tools, but our opponent has 3 creatures to eat in the graveyard, get their scoos up to a large thing. If we attack with Goblin Guide, that's 4th and 5th creatures in the graveyard. So it's kind of a situation where maybe it was a bit of a premature, but not drawing our second land and realizing that Sanctifier and Vec was just kind of a terrible sideboard card in this matchup. So that said, let's look to see how we change the sideboarding for game number 3. Right, sideboarding for game number 3, I did board the Sanctifier and Vex back out. Brought the 3 Eidolons back in, really about all we could do. I mean, we could bring in Boros Charm, but Eidolon on the play could be somewhat effective. Taking a look at this hand, 1 lander, probably a mulligan. This hand is fine. Suspend the Rift Bolt, that way if our opponent decides they're going to play a Mana Dork, it's just going to die, which we do kill it. Into Eidolon. Opponent plays Strangleroot Geist, so we're just kind of in this weird standoff position. We suspend the Rift Bolt. They play Drolls Messenger. Which is obviously the main reason I brought out Sanctifier and Vec. I really think our opponent should have considered getting aggressive here. Because we're just going to win the game kind of as is. And then our opponent does the thing. They choose not to attack at all, which once again I think is a bit of a mistake. But, opponent chords for 1. Essence Warden, we have Searing Blaze up. Kill Essence Warden there. Opponent is digging for something, and then they just concede without seeing anything else. But, they can't cast any spells other than Yawg and Chord, basically. Essence Warden was kind of maybe their one way of getting back into the game without being able to Essence Warden and I believe Obstinate Baloth are their primary tools in the matchup. So the fact that we were able to deal with Essence Warden so quickly. This matchup feels okay. I don't think it's quite as good as the Elf matchup is, but I think it's still a reasonable matchup. They are a Mana Dork deck. Burn historically has been pretty decent against Mana Dork decks. From my experience, decks like Infect, decks like Elves, those kind of decks have been reasonable matchups for Burn. just because, you know, we're able to generally answer their mana dorks pretty quickly. And a lot of these dorks are pretty dependent upon their mana dorks, and Yawg is no exception. It's a very mana-hungry deck. So, felt good to get the win here. Not a matchup I've played a ton of, although I have seen it more in these next couple. In this league, I believe, played it at least once, and I think in the following league, I also played it once. So, definitely a deck that, you know, picks up as it does well in more and more spots. But, yeah, that's it. Let's go to the next match and see how we do. All right, back for match number 4. Lost die roll, unfortunately. Field our companion. One lander. High upside. Maybe you shouldn't have kept this hand. Opponent's a Misty Rainforest. Plays Ignoble Hierarch. So likely up against Yawg again. Not too many decks run Ignoble Hierarch. Opponent goes and gets Endurance. Okay. Draw our second land, bailing us out a little bit. Spike, no attack, obviously. Opponent with a Strangleroot Geist. We choose to Lava Spike. We choose to Skewer. Attack in. Opponent does the thing. Possible I should have skewered their second main phase just because. Opponent with a Yawg. They get in for a bunch. We go ahead and finish them off with burn spells here. So obviously, opponent with a little bit more vulnerable of a draw. Not sure Endurance was the best thing they could have gotten, but I guess game 1. Alternatively, I guess they could have gotten Grist to produce a bunch of chump blockers, though the end result's kind of the same. You know, Endurance did roadblock us for a turn or two until we were just eventually able to overpower it. And, you know, once again, these creature-based decks, Yawg's a very resilient deck, but, you know, without life gain, they do a little bit of damage to themselves with their mana base. Their mana dorks are a little bit vulnerable to what our burn spells do, so, you know, generally the creature decks burn struggles with our decks that can put out much bigger creatures, you know, things like Tarmogoyf, Death Shadow, those kind of things, where Burn's removal is kind of pitiful, and just historically, Burn tends to do fairly well against X3 or less decks. So that's it. Let's look at our sideboarding and prepare for game number 2. All right, looking at our sideboarding, looks like we boarded out the Eidolons on the draw, and 1 copy of Skewer, or 3 copies of Roiling Vortex, and 2 copies of Path to Exile. Once again, the way they win the game, kind of out-life gaining us with Blood Artist or Essence Warden or Obstinate Baloth. Once again, keeping a bit of a risky one-lander, but noticing myself doing that a little bit more, and maybe I should be backing off of that. With the Wall of Roots, we go no attack, they block, we get bailed out by a second land, we go ahead and hit them with a Searing Blaze Coast Combat, which we figured they'd block anyway, so it was kind of whatever. Opponent has an Endurance, which is fine. We get in for some damage here, put them to 9. They play Ignoble Hierarch, they play Strangleroot Geist. One thing I do like about this particular opponent is they are being a little bit more aggressive. Unfortunately, you know, Yawg is not the fastest clock in the world, so, you know, we were able to get the win. So, I do believe we play this matchup in another league that I'll have to post-record or, you know, review overall. And I do end up believe I end up losing that match. You really get a feeling for pilots of decks, you know, their skill with the deck, you know, the crafting of a deck, etc. There's another, and once again, this is a post-recording, so I'm talking about other leagues, but you really get a feel for people who take a deck and make it their own. I play against a blue-white mill opponent who very clearly knows what his deck's weaknesses is, knows that Burn's a weak matchup, and his sideboard reflects that. You know, there's really, you know, a high bar for people who take a deck and make it their own, who customize it, who tailor it through a format. And one of the things I know I talk about, and this is kind of a random place for this diatribe, but one of the things I talk about with Burn is Burn has a very low initial skill level. And you can get quite a bit of an edge playing Burn as a experienced pilot. But that said, there are some decks that just have more edges to them. Yawgmoth, Amulet Titan, Death Shadow, the Grixis Shadow variants, possibly even Murktide. I don't have enough experience with the deck to know about that one. But those decks where you have like this corner case scenario where a deck is playable, but people who like spend their entire time playing with a deck, learning its ins and outs, just get so much extra from wins that they shouldn't pick up. And while I think in paper that still applies with Burn, as your usual F&M, the skill level of your average F&M opponent I think is a lot lower than the average MTGO player at this point, as people basically MTGO a lot of ways has become kind of the grinders thing. So it's a lot harder for someone who's an average, maybe slightly above average skill like myself to, get huge edges. Now I'll go on runs where I'll do well with decks or, that kind of stuff. But the reality is, unless you're really good at Magic and can dedicate the time, you're generally not going to do great sustain-wise. That said, Burn can do well. GG has had some recent success with his leagues and events and paper and such, so I'm not saying Burn isn't a good deck right now, I'm just simply saying that I haven't had the best success with it. So that said, let's get into match number 5 and see how this league closes out. Back for match number 5 in this league. We're on the draw, unfortunately. So it isn't the best, obviously. We don't have a 1-drop creature or anything, but still pretty reasonable on the draw. It goes Misty Rainforest Forest. We've seen this opening a lot lately. However, they leave on Elvish Mystic, so we're up against Elves. Generally a reasonable matchup for Burn. Opponent does the thing here. We go ahead and get Eidolon down, as it's generally pretty good against Elves. We attack. Opponent plays Dwyne's Elite, takes some damage. We suspend some Rift Bolts, pass turn. Opponent once again getting in for some chip shot damage. Plays Heritage Druid. I choose to throw bolts upstairs, as I look like I'm going for the burnout plan here. And then we just Lava Spike, and then hold a Boros Charm. That way if our opponent casts any more spells, they're just dead. So opponent gets in for some damage here. We go ahead and chump block. We play Aquarian Ranger and decide to unload their hand at this point. We play Boros Charm, then untap and just kill them. So, like I said, generally this is a pretty good matchup, but there's been an adaptation of their deck of late. The last 2 times I've run into Elves, and we'll see that immediately in the next 2 games. Spoiler alert. But Elves has adapted a new piece of technology that makes the matchup a little bit more difficult than it used to be historically. So let's get into some sideboarding. Alright, sideboarding once again, boarding out Boros Charms, not sure whether this is correct or not. 1 Skewer the Critics as well, boarding in 3 Whirling Vortexes and 2 copies of Path to Exile. As one of the sideboard techs I've been seeing out of Elves lately, those versions that have been doing well with Leyline of Vitality, and that's a consistent source of life gain, which can be a problem. Look at this hand, it's not the fantasticest with 4 lands. We end up keeping it, but it's a huge risk, obviously. We go Swift Spear. See, Leyline of Vitality not only gives their creatures an extra point of toughness, which makes some of their 2 toughness guys 3 toughness and 3 toughness guys 4, making it much more difficult to kill their creatures once they get a Lord into play. but it also gains them a life every time a creature enters the battlefield under their control. Opponent gains a bunch of life. We don't really have to care about what we're doing. We play that. They play another Dwyne's Elite going wide around us. They can kind of attack with immunity because Swift Spear can't really kill their guys. And this kind of like gets in the situation where Roiling Vortex is just bad. Let our opponent go to combat here. We go ahead and do the thing. Lightning Helix one, blocking another, pathing another. Kind of clearing out their board as best we can. But, you know, we're in a kind of a situation where if they draw any kind of payoff here, we're in some trouble. Collect a Company is certainly a payoff. They hit Elvis Champion and that. And we're just kind of at the point where, you know, maybe it was premature to concede here once again. But, you know, our opponent has an overwhelming board presence. We're taking damage from our own Roiling Vortex. We only have one more Lightning Helix in our deck. Our Sunbaked Canyons are going to deal us damage. So, you know, Leyline of Vitality combined with kind of keeping a bit of a poor hand, getting us a little bit here in the spot. The Leyline of Vitality, once again, is kind of their new tech in the matchup. So, see how we sideboard for game number 3. So I continue with the same sideboard plan. In hindsight, maybe I'm supposed to bring in Wear Terrors, although it's really kind of hard because without that card, the matchup's fairly good. This hand's pretty reasonable. 2 1-drops into Skullcrack plus Skewer the Critics. But our opponent, double Leyline of Vitality, kind of rough. Opponent with an Elf, and it's a 1/3. So we go ahead and do the thing. Opponent plays Dwyne's Elite, which is a 2/4, which basically stonewalls our entire thing. We have to path it, which is like absolutely terrible, feeding them in mana for a Collected Company. We'll put them to 10. Hold on to Skewer the Critics because, you know, I want to be able to prevent some life gain potentially. You know, we can't even really attack at this point. I guess we choose to attack anyway. Opponent chooses not to block, which will come up in a second. We go ahead and Skullcrack them. They do the thing. Then they pass. And then we can't really attack into their 1/3 board. They Collected Company. We're looking for some copy of Skullcrack, which we only had one more in the deck anyway. Opponent gains a bunch of life. They untap. They play War Master, gain a bunch more life. Do the thing. And at this point, we're just kind of, you know, in a no-win situation, basically. Double Leyline of Vitality just is not reasonably beatable by a burn deck, especially in a deck that's just playing nothing but creatures. So, as far as a quick wrap-up, you know, Modern has felt in a really weird place. Now, I haven't had the best results in Modern of late, whether it be with Murktide or Burn. You know, I've had some recent, had a recent 4-1 with Burn. Tried out Grixis Shadow in an off-camera thing. I'm not going to record. It didn't go particularly well. You know, obviously, life's happened. You know, work things have changed. I've moved. You know, from a content creation, I'm kind of at a weird standstill. So I really want to expand what I do. You know, as I've had wanted to do it at other points, but I also want to maintain a balance in life. And you know, I've chosen to focus on Burn. I've chosen to focus on Murktide, kind of condensing what the channel does again. Done a little bit of work in some other formats, getting into arena stuff a little bit more, just because that's clearly where Magic is headed eventually, whether we want to or not. You know, what they're going to do with formats like Modern and Legacy, you know, Pioneer, kind of a dying breed. You know, Arena is the future of Magic, whether we want it to or not. You know, I'm not a big enough name where I can sustain a large channel on the basis of doing multiple things like a Jeff Hoogland or a CGB or a Croakies. So I'm having to optimize for content creation. Obviously, you know, the way YouTube works, there's generally one or two content creators that tend to dominate a specific niche. For a long time in Burn, that was me. Look back at some of my old videos, I used to get, you know, 3, 4, 5,000 views quite easily for Burn videos. I made some choices to step away from Burn content or step away from content in general, etc. And a rising star, GG for Goblin God, came along. Now he's kind of the he does very good content. I'm not going to deny that. The algorithm, certainly, he took over the algorithm in regards of Burn content. And while I continue to put out Burn content, it doesn't do anywhere near as well as it used to. That said, I'm still going to continue to do it, but Burn hasn't felt very... I have a love-hate relationship with Burn. I like Burn because it's a deck that's obviously fairly easy to pilot. It doesn't require you to necessarily keep up with the most insane knowledge of the format. And, you know, you can do all of it. GG's done well in some recent tournaments. Had a 4-1 in one of his recent videos. But my experiences with Burn the last couple of weeks have been moderate. I think overall I have like a 60% win percentage, which is, you know, which is perfectly fine. But, you know, it's felt like a slog. Which, I don't know if that's just the state of Modern right now or what. But both this and Murktide, you know, the leagues feel like a slog. You know, maybe that's because I'm used to... And as I'm going back and replaying some of the... Part of the reason why I did this was to go back and look at some things. And I'm noticing a lot of loose keeps on my part. I'm keeping a lot of 1-landers. I'm keeping a lot of 4-landers. So sometimes going back and reviewing things like this is actually quite nice. So, that said, you know, we're going to continue with the Burn content. I'm going to continue with the Murktide content. I'm going to continue to try to get a consistent content schedule out there. As far as what 2282 brings into things, I don't know. You know, I'm on vacation this week, so I'm trying to get some content done, but I've also been spending time with family. Spent some time with my parents and my sister and brother-in-law, and then in a couple of days, which probably about the time these videos go up, I'll be spending some time with my brothers. So even though I've been in the new place for a couple of weeks, I've only actually been home here for like maybe a day and a half, 2 days out of the 10 days I've been, because I was off Friday through the following Sunday, but like Sunday afternoon through Wednesday afternoon, I was back at my parents' house for a while, and then Friday afternoon or Saturday morning through through Sunday morning, I'll be at my brother's. So it's kind of like I've been home, I've been on vacation, but I haven't been, yeah. So, anyways, that said, content's going to continue. Not going anywhere. Just don't know how much oomphe's going to go into it beyond, like, if I'm going to increase the current level or if I'm just going to kind of stick to what we're currently doing. So, that said, if you do like other Burn content, check out GG for Goblin God. He's an excellent content creator. And hope to see you for the next video. P.S. Let me know what you think if you watched this diatribe all the way through. What you think of this particular content creation as opposed to the live things. Sometimes it's nice to look back at matches and go, oh yeah, I screwed up here, oh yeah, I could have done this here, or oh yeah, I missed this here. So, or you know, why I take some weird lines I take sometimes. So that's it. Let's hope to see you for the next video.